I hope King Charles was watching this week. I hope he was watching the King. Because we got a reminder that colonialism in some places by some countries, well, that might not have been quite so bad after all. And maybe King Charles should stop groveling so much. Now, I know colonialism is now a dirty C word. You know, it's disgusting to even suggest it wasn't all terrible. And Charles is under huge pressure now to keep apologising for it, especially by activists and journalists in America. You know, these kind of guys who want to spread the shame of their own racist history. Look, Britain was just as bad. Plus, you've got the usual race grifters with their hands out for compensation. Now, it is true, a lot of colonialism was disgusting, really. I mean, look at Belgian Congo for a start. You know, it was driven by greed, imposed with cruelty. There's not much colonialism that was done out of the goodness of someone's heart. Let's be honest about that. But I don't really need to go as far back as, you know, the Spanish conquest of Mexico to wonder whether some of the tribes there, for instance, thought the conquistadors might not have actually been a good change, actually, from the ruling Aztecs with their cult of human sacrifice and their slavery. Just last November, there was King Charles again being sorry to South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, about the history of British colonialism there.
While there are elements of that history which provoke profound sorrow,
and it's no doubt British colonialism in South Africa was racist. But then, you know, groveling to Ramaphosa for the sins of 100, 150 years ago, whatever, when the British actually freed the slaves that had found there, that sticks a bit in the craw, you know. When you see how this bloke's government is driving South Africa today into the ground. I mean, you got terrible crime, terrible corruption, a failing economy. And now a state of emergency just been declared because South Africa's electricity system is now so terrible that most parts of the country are down to just 10 hours of power a day. What are these guys doing? But you're right. Again, I couldn't possibly argue at all that colonialism was a great good for South Africa net, I think. But let's look at a much easier case. Papua New Guinea. That's just north of Australia, a former colony of Britain. Part of it was a colony of Germany, until Australia then took it all over for more than 60 years, until 1975. Now, before, particularly the British colonisation there, you know, you had agriculture, extremely primitive, still is in many parts. Stone tools, often then. Slash and burn agriculture. Extremely violent society as well. Cannibalism. Now, with colonisation, at least you got some order in the towns. You got a police force, you got an education, some economic activity, tea plantations, courts and magistrates to protect the weak, the start of democracy. And now you look, can anyone honestly say that colonialism in Papua New Guinea, well, that was a great evil and thank God it's all over and there's now independence and, well, the country's not looked back. Really? I mean, this week, this is what I hope Prince Charles was paying attention to. This week, Papua New Guinea forces somehow miraculously freed an archaeologist, Professor Bryce Barker, who's a New Zealander living in Australia, had been, and freed his 3 female assistants as well. They've been kidnapped during a field trip in the mountains of PNG, and they've been held for a week. Ransom was demanded, $1 million, whatever. Just how they were freed, no one's really saying. Maybe some people in power realise that this wouldn't work out so well when Australia is still PNG's biggest foreign donor, $500 million a year nearly, essentially keeping the country afloat. Let this guy go, make sure he comes home, or, you know. But the fact is, you know, you look at those figures. The fact is, Papua New Guinea, independent Papua New Guinea, free of colonialism, is what you might technically call, what is that economic term? A busted ass country, where the colonialism of the 1960s, well, they're sure looking like the good old days. Because since then, what has happened there? I mean, crime in Papua New Guinea is now about the worst in the world, outside of war zone, has been for years, thanks to armed gangs called raskols. The murder rate in the capital has been more than 20 times that in London. Government authority is weak, and in the highlands they're almost non-existent. In fact, Papua New Guinea's road network is still almost non-existent too. The capital, Port Moresby, still doesn't have a road link to one single other city in the entire country. About half the people in rural areas, they don't have electricity, never have. And how many people there actually are in this country, that's simply a guess. Is it 9 million, like the government says, or is it nearly double that, 17 million, like a new United Nations study estimates from satellite photos? I mean, the government's so dysfunctional, they can't even tell you how many people it actually has. Makes you wonder about elections, right, too? And don't even talk about the corruption. And I tell you, if it wasn't for foreign investment there, you know, foreign companies digging out the country's fabulous minerals, PNG would have almost nothing. Most people there just grow food for themselves. There's almost no manufacturing. And remember, this is a country so rich in natural resources. And it's not that far east of Singapore, which is almost nothing there but brains and a work ethic, and look at living standards there. And the sick joke is, Papua New Guinea never really wanted to be independent. It kind of liked the colonialism. Even its first Prime Minister said, we want to stay a colony of Australia. But you know how it is. It was the 1970s. It was the anti-colonialism thing. That was all the rage. Anti-Britain, bah. And Australia's new left-wing Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, he was ashamed. He was ashamed of Australia's colonialism and wouldn't listen to the will of the locals.
These native people from the eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea, and there are about 5,000 of them here, have come to give the Prime Minister, Mr Whitlam, and the Chief Minister, Mr Samari, a traditional sing-sing, a welcome to Goroka. This sing-sing is not without its political significance. These people did not want to hold a sing-sing if it meant support for independence. They're very concerned about independence. They don't want independence yet. In fact, they presented the Prime Minister with a petition, and it sets out the following terms. We oppose your government setting a date for independence. We are vigorously opposed to our present government setting dates for independence because it is their decision, not ours, and we have no confidence in their ability to handle independence.
They could sing all they like, but it didn't matter. You know how it is with so many on the left? It's ideology above facts, or in this case, ideology above practical good. No, said the Australian Prime Minister, I'm too embarrassed to be a colonialist. And he cut them loose.
Australia is no longer willing to be the ruler of a colony. And my government is determined to divest itself of that role in the lifetime of the present Australian Parliament.
And now look, what a disaster. You know, Australians can praise themselves, oh, good people, giving away a colony, good people. But have a look. You know, the Papua New Guinea. What a mess. And what is true of Papua New Guinea is also at least partially true of so many other former British colonies. I bet right now, for instance, the people of Hong Kong be desperate to live under the British again. Make us your colony again, rather than under the heel, the brutal heel of the Chinese Communist Party, which has crushed democracy there, crushed free speech. Hasn't done too bad pancaking the economy there either. So I would say to King Charles, a little less apologising, a little more of asking the rulers of these former colonies, independent now for many, many decades, they can stop blaming Britain at some stage. I would have thought, hey guys, what have you now done for your people? with all the things that Britain left behind, like, hello, parliaments, what have you done? I know, colonialism, wrong in principle, almost always wrong in deeds. But in some cases, Papua New Guinea, colonialism could actually have been the best of only bad options. And for that, there's no apology necessary.